Hello, it's time for our daily devotional. Um, Welcome. If this is your first time, we've been working our way through Proverbs, but one verse at a time. The book of Proverbs in the Old Testament of the Bible. We were going through it one verse at a time, just gleaning God's wisdom about how to be wise people. That's what the whole book is about. So we've just been doing that. We're in chapter 6. We're going to look at that today. Chapter 6, verse 9. That's where we're at today. So I'm going to read that in a second, just to let everybody know. I've been a little under the weather, so I've been struggling a little bit, but God willing, I'll just keep on going. Um, Anyways, here we are. Let's read the verse. Now we've been reading these verses in chapter 6 of Proverbs as little paragraphs that kind of are context for the verse. So we're going to read that context, and then we're going to focus on verse 9. So I'm just going to read verse 6 to 11, and then we'll focus on it. So it says this: "Go to the ant, O sluggard, observe her ways, and be wise, which, having no chief, officer, or ruler, prepares her food in the summer and gathers her provision in the harvest. How long will you lie down, O sluggard? When will you arise from your sleep? A little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest. Your poverty will come in like a vagabond, and your need like an armed man." So the theme here, of course, is talking to the sluggard, a lazy person, and saying, look at the ant. Like just take a look at the ant as an example, as an illustration of vigilance and being responsible, so that you can prepare your food in the good times, so that when the hard time comes, you have it. And that's the general theme. But we've been looking at each verse because each one gives us a little glimpse of something, of a truth. So verse 9 of this says this. It says, "How long will you lie down, O sluggard? When will you arise from your sleep?" So the question to the lazy person, right? How long are you going to do this? Now we talked in the previous video. We talked a little bit about the timing of things, and that there is a need for working when the right time is, and then resting when the right time is. And so that's an important thing to remember. There is a time to rest. God designed you to have a time for rest, but He also designed you to have a time for work. And so that's an important theme that you'll see throughout the scriptures. But in this verse is for sure that there's a time to work. So when we get to this verse, it's kind of like saying, well, how long is your rest going to be? We have a temptation. If we give into our laziness, we have a temptation to extend the rest time and make it longer and longer and longer. And so this is kind of asking that question in a kind of rhetorical way, right? But how long are you going to rest? The whole summer? You're going to go the whole summer and not prepare? Because the winter is going to feel awful long if you do that. And so that's the idea. There's this idea. We have this little saying in my culture and in the English world, I think. The energy begets energy. This idea that lack of energy begets lack of energy. And so there's this idea that if you're feeling drained and tired, and if you just give into that, then you'll feel even more drained and tired. But if you exercise and do things, then that will create in you an energy to do more things. And so it's an interesting little non-biblical proverb, and I think there's some truth to that. I think it sort of applies here. We tend to form energy routines, because we are of course creatures that need both. We need to work, and we need to rest. And so we naturally, as we grow older, we naturally form routines in life that allow us to have times of productivity and allow us to have time to rest. Now, they can often get very dysfunctional in either way. You can become an overworker and never rest, and that's not really good. And you can also become an over-rester and never work, and that's what this is talking about. But those routines we develop, and learning how to develop a healthy routine is really important in answering this rhetorical question, but answering the question, how long should I rest, is an important thing to figure out in our life, especially as we're growing up, from our young years where we're under our parents' care and they set routines for us. And as we get to a point where we start to set our own routines, it's really important to figure out how to do that well, right? So the Bible, of course, gives us some guidance on this. We can think about, and I mentioned this in the last video, but I'll mention it again today. Just we can think about, for instance, the command of God to have a Sabbath. This idea of having one day every week, in which you determine not to work, right? You will not work. Like 6 days, you will work. One day, you will not work. And then so there's this idea that God gave us in that of just the importance of having a routine, right? So these are the days I will work, and I will work. And then here's the day I will not work, and I will not work. I'm not going to work. I need to recuperate. So that's a cycle. We see a 7-day cycle there, right? Of just recuperating. There's other examples in the Bible, the idea of the fallow field where, every seventh year, I think it was, every seventh year, you're supposed to leave a field fallow, let the land rest, right? So there's another cycle, or the day-night cycle, to work in the day as long as it's day, and the time for rest when no one can work in the night, and so we get these ideas of cycles, and there's important and healthy cycles we can build. And if we're not careful about it, we could fall into dysfunction either way. So here's a couple cycles, for instance, you really need to figure out. One is your sleep cycle. Figuring out when to sleep. When should I actually sleep? Now, tomorrow's devotional, we'll talk a little more about the little sleep, little slumber thing. But setting a good sleep cycle in your life is a good idea, and it's hard to do. Some people have actual clinical dysfunction in their sleep, and you need help, and that's one thing. But all of us, to some degree, we can have the temptation of staying up too late and then being exhausted at work the next day. And I've gone through that. I know what that's like, or just not having a very good sleep routine, and that's an important thing to develop. But whatever you start to do as a routine, it becomes a routine that dictates your life, and it doesn't take long for that to happen. Another one's our procrastination cycles. There is a time when procrastination can be okay, right? There is such a thing as it's okay to procrastinate, for instance, on the Sabbath. It's okay to say, no, not today. I'll do it tomorrow. That's okay. That's a good time for that. But getting into a good cycle of putting off things, there's sometimes it's actually very healthy to put something off, to procrastinate, to put it off, to focus on something else, right? That something's important. I got to do this now. I don't need to do that now. I can put that off till later. And that's okay. But getting into healthy cycles of procrastination, so that it's not just a sluggard's way, right? The lazy person puts everything off because I'd rather just a little time here to sit and rest, right? No. There's a healthy procrastination cycle, or an avoidance cycle. There's sometimes we avoid things we don't like, work that we don't like, we'll leave it to last or whatever. And in a similar way, it's an avoidance cycle. And sometimes that's good for your psychological health to avoid a little bit. But there's a cycle you can get into that's very unhealthy. And so you want to manage that. How and when do I do it? And then we fall into rationalizing what feels emotionally satisfying in the moment, and it ends up being very unhealthy. And that's what the sluggard often does is, I don't want to deal with this stress, or I don't want to deal with this effort, or I don't want to have to expend energy. I'd rather just rest, or rather just feed myself and indulge myself. And so then you rationalize it. I don't really need to work. There's lots of summer left. I don't need to collect food now. And we rationalize, and we can fall into a bad dysfunctional cycle. So you got to do this. I'm going to give you one little piece of advice today. There's lots of ways to approach this, but I'm going to give you one little piece of advice today about how to get out of bad cycles that you might have developed in your life when it comes to doing your work that you need to do in your life. And one of the ways to do that is to ask yourself the question, and to legitimately ask yourself the question, when is the right time for me to do this, right? So you've got something you need to do, something you're supposed to do, the time. God has set up times for things, right? And society sets up times for things. So, when is the right time to do this? And so you don't just say to yourself this, not now, right? That's how you fall into the bad cycle. You just say, is now the time? No, not now. I'm not going to do that now. And you don't ask yourself, when will I do it? Instead, you just say, now is not the time. So you push it off, and you push it off. I'm going to have a little sleep, a little slumber, and you push it off. And then later comes, and it's like, is this the time to do it? Not now. And you push it off again. And all you're answering is the question of, is now the time? And so it's easy to say, no, not now, because you can look at all the future, and you can say, there's lots of places in the future for me to do this. And but you don't set one. You just say, not now. And that leads to a habit, a cycle of it's never now. And eventually all of the nows go by, and you've lost the opportunity to do the thing. And now in the ant's example, now you're in the winter and you haven't gathered any food. So you're going to starve. And that's then you regret it. You're like, oh no, look, I've what a waste. I can't believe I wasted all my time. Young people do this with projects at school, right? When are you going to do your project? Yeah, not today. And so then dad asks you again, are you going to do your project today? Well, no, I'm going to, no, not today. I got lots to read. I'll do that in the weekend or something. And it's not now, not now. And then before you know it, you're standing in front of your teacher without a project. And that's the way that goes, right? So instead of saying not now and saying this isn't the time, instead of answering that question, start teaching yourself to answer the question, when is the time? And you might say, well, not now, but when? When is the time? And set the time. Sometimes because we need to fool ourselves, our own psychological need, we need to fool ourselves sometimes into thinking, that so you can do that, but you want to do it by saying, okay, if not now, then when? I'll do it tomorrow. Okay. But then do it tomorrow. Set in your mind a rule. Don't give yourself permission to change the goal later. Set it. That's to go back to the project idea. If you're not going to do it tonight and you're going to do it tomorrow night, then set it and don't change it. When you come to tomorrow night, do it. That's the time you set for it. And if you teach yourself to not give yourself permission to change the goal every time, it can help you start to set a better pattern. And there's lots of other things, but I don't want my video to go on forever. There's different things you can do. The point of this scripture is answer the question, how long? How long are you going to lie down? Rather than just saying, I'm going to lie down. How long are you going to lie down? When are you going to set your alarm for? What time in the morning are you going to get up? The sluggard doesn't set an alarm clock. The sluggard decides to sleep till he's done sleeping, and he's never done sleeping. But the responsible person says, okay, I do need to rest, but I'm going to get up at this time, and I'm going to start work, and I'm going to do the job, and then I'll rest again at the end of it. And that's a better way. God help us to do it. Help us to get good habits. God bless you. God willing, we'll be back tomorrow with verse 10. And in the meantime, have a good day.